Hey, this is Mark Henry, author of Dancing with Energy, Healing, Magic, and Mysticism. Well, today I'm going to be talking about the magic of time. Well, what exactly is time? Time is the measure of the amount of change in our physical reality, and it's usually measured by machines, clock, watches, etc. But there are different models of time, different ways of understanding time. Physics understands time in a way that is different than the way our mind understands time. What I'm going to be doing is actually talking about a couple methods of altering time through magic and whatnot, using one of the means that I'm going to discuss, but I'm also going to mention another one just for the sake of learning a little bit more about time. Okay, so the first model of time I want to talk about is linear time. This is very self-explanatory. It's very common sense the way that we normally perceive time, although it is the way that physics understands time is slightly different. And there are exceptions, of course, the way we perceive time. But the way we perceive time is in a linear fashion. So there's a past, there's a present, and there's a future. And what we know is we think about the past affecting our present, and our present affecting our future. Now, that's the way we understand and work with time. However, that is not the only way. If you look at what other religions offer, like Buddhism and Hinduism, they have a more circular understanding of time. That is, if you look at the doctrine of reincarnation, what it basically says is that we live and then we die and we live again. So there's an endless cycle of birth, death, rebirth, until somehow you get off of the wheel of samsara, the wheel of be liberated from that whole cycle. And there's, of course, there's transmigration of the soul, where you can actually be different beings and things like that. It doesn't have to be human. But that is kind of a way of understanding time and events in a non-linear fashion. There's also one thing similar to that, which I kind of like. It makes my I kind of like the idea. It's called the doctrine of eternal recurrence. Now, this existed before, however, it was made more popular with Friedrich Nietzsche. Now, Nietzsche, what he said was that given an infinite amount of time and finite events, that we will infinitely go through the same experiences over and over. Now, we won't necessarily notice that, but if time is infinite, then it will happen. Just like eventually were those experiments or thought experiments about if you had a monkey playing the piano in an infinite amount of time, that eventually they will create, major pieces of music just through the laws of probability. So that is the kind of a more circular understanding of time. Now let's get back to how this relates to magic and altering time. If we just look at linear time, and by the way, I'm not saying that you cannot work with altering time in the second way, the circular way, but what I am saying is that just because it is much easier to conceptualize time as linear, that might be one thing that you want to focus on. So the first one I want to talk about is something that I learned from Taylor Elwood. He's a friend, mentor, has written a lot of books, and he discusses, and I'm going to mention his book at the end in case you want to learn more about time, how to work with time in magic. He works with the idea of retroactive magic. So what that is actually going into the past, using your mind, your awareness, altering it, and then by doing that, you are opening up new possibilities, which then you can align with a different present and a different future. Now, of course, when we're talking about time, we're not talking about changing things that have already happened, because that's the definition of, I guess we're not discussing changing historical time. If something happened to me 6 years ago, and let's say I went out to a concert with a friend. By me going in my mind and going and doing magic, I'm not changing that. My friend can always, who was there, said, hey, remember that time and we did this and we did that? So that's not going to change. What is going to change is your, maybe possibly your memories, the energy that was associated with that past in that memory, which when changed kind of goes from, if you're right here, excuse me, it opens it up so you can actually go in different directions with your awareness, your perception, and opening up new possibilities, new adventures, that type of thing. Retroactive magic. And by affecting the past in that way, you're also changing the past, you are changing the psyche, the makeup of your present, and you will inexorably alter your future. In fact, through that type of magic, you might find yourself actually perceiving things differently. It's a very real possibility. This is on a more mundane level. This has already been going on for decades in hypnosis. Hypnotist goes and he goes to the past of where there is some type of trauma. He helps a person either re-experience it, heal it, do something come up with a different understanding of it, and then from that point on, as that person moves through their life, they will pick up information, they will see things differently, probably live in a more functional and healthy way psychologically because of that intervention. So this has been going on for a while in a slightly different way. However, this is kind of, I guess, the gist of retroactive magic. Working with the past in order to change the past, present, and future. And remember, it's about our thoughts and our intentions and our will with magic. That is the kind of the building blocks. And of course, along with when you're doing your invocations and evocations of spirits, of course. But I guess it all rests with you in a sense, and you deciding what you want and how you're focusing your awareness. All right, so the second one is called the remembering process. The remembering process is something I mentioned in an earlier video. This particular thing was, I guess, popularized by Joe Vitale, hypnotist. And what he basically said is that, let's say that I want $30,000. That if I think about how am I going to get $30,000, if I'm someone who's not used to having that, that might be difficult for me. I've got to think about step by step how I can go and get that $30,000. Then I've got to think about, okay, well, what if one of these steps doesn't happen, then I can't get it. And it seems like when we move from the present into the future to achieve our goals, that there's usually, sometimes we kind of freak ourselves out or doubt ourselves, and it doesn't necessarily happen. However, he says, what if instead of doing things operating from the present, looking into the future in order to achieve your goal, why don't you imagine a future time after you've achieved the goal, and then you look back and look at what happened in order for you to achieve it. Bring that information back to the present and then work with it. Pretty interesting. So that would be the practical level, looking at the steps. However, like on a more metaphysical level, if you believe in the law of alignment, moving past the goal, looking backwards. So I'm somebody who, let's say, who's 50 years old, and I'm looking back to see how I achieved my goal. Well, after your mind's accepted that's already done, it can relax a little bit. So all it has to do is to look backwards. And by looking backwards, you're actually you're still aligning with that particular thing and making it more likely to happen, as long as you can take that perception back with you in real time in the present. So what does Joe do in order to do this remembering process? What he does, he starts talking to himself. He uses a lot of self-talk. So he might say something like that, like, "Hey, remember that time that I got that $100,000, playing at the casino? Wow, that was such a wonderful thing. It just seemed like I just walked into the casino and it really happened." Or maybe even a better example, because there is that uncertainty of, luck and casinos and things like that. Uh, what if he, at age 50, was looking back at the woman that he wanted and saying, "Wow, I really have a good relationship with this person, and she looks like this, and she takes care of me, and we have a good relationship. We bond really well, and I'm able to, help her do things, and we just really are really good friends." By doing that, he could possibly attract that person to him, that type of relationship. Now, if he stayed in the present and saying, "Yeah, this is what I want, but I'm not sure how to do it," it might seem like something that's a little bit out of his reach. So that's a remembering process. You can even, if you want to have some fun, because it's kind of like a thought experiment. It's like a mental exercise. So it's kind of a fun thing to do. I've done a little bit. It's surprising how much it discharges resistance to setting goals and trying to project for things in the future. You can even get your friends on it. You can start doing these self-statements, talking about this wonderful thing that already happened. This thing that happened before, and now you're talking about it. So you can get your friends to go in on it and say, "Yeah, hey, I remember when you met her. You were just walking down the street and she came up to you," and all this type of stuff. So you can get your friends on. It even makes it more real. It's like creating these different type of stories, but these positive stories that will support you, and not the type of stories that we tend to create for ourselves in our minds that work for our downfall. So a good little fun exercise, remembering process. Okay, so another one. This is one that I personally do a lot. This is actually using energy work. Because along with consciousness, we can project energy. And I do it at least a few times a week, where I will actually go back into the past and send healing energy to a past self. I think about some difficult times in my life. Especially, you'll find yourself maybe in adolescence having some difficult times, and sometimes I go back and I will support that earlier Mark, send him energy, positive thoughts, healing symbols, and I move on to maybe, the next day working on different experience, something negative. Or if you don't want to sort through the past for, at a certain age that I might need it, you could actually sort for blocks of time. In general, some energy for when I went through high school, or that thing, that age of 5 where I had a hard time. So you can sort and give it to the past you, send it to past experiences that you had a hard time, even blocks of time. And I find that it does have an impact. That when I look back, and if I do deal with an issue that was related to that, I have an easier time moving forward. It's like instead of having a little bit of stress or anxiety in you from a similar issue, I'll find that I move through it very quickly. Now, here's a word of warning, too, for if you try to do this type of magic in the past, is that if you go around messing with the past healing different parts of you in the past, doing the retroactive magic in the past in order to change, the present and future. You need to understand that by doing that, you will create ripples through time and through your psyche that you may not expect. For example, what if you did this and you found that you did that healing work or the retroactive magic, that suddenly there are parts of yourself that are different, that, and I don't necessarily, doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing, but we are used to parts of ourselves that give us a little bit of personality, that give us a little bit of what makes us us, that people understand and respond to, is that by doing the magic and the healing, you might actually erase some of these things so that you are a kind of a different person, and now you are a different you who now walks through the world, but you're kind of used to the way that you used to be. Something to think about. There may be parts of you that you like that you didn't think were associated with this experience that you had in the past, but you went back into the past and you went and healed it and changed it. And now you don't have access to that, or it's completely gone. So be sure that when you're thinking about these things that you're prioritizing, okay, I want this thing healed or different more than I care about some of these little minor personality characteristics that might make me funny or things like that. What if, what if you have friends who laugh at your sarcasm, but your sarcasm developed because of some really crazy things that happened to you in childhood? You went back in time, you kind of cleaned up this stuff, and now you don't have the same type of sarcasm. Well, now your friends might not think you're that as funny as you were before. Hopefully they still love you, since they're still your friends. But I just want to provide an example and a kind of a little bit of a warning that if you see these types of things in your present, that it could be because of your work. But there are consequences to everything, so live and learn. All right, so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to, at the bottom of this video, I'm going to put links to those books in case you're interested in learning more about it, the Remembering Process, and Taylor's book, Space-Time Magic. So please remember to subscribe and like. I've been getting a lot of comments, and I like the good comments. I like the comments that are not so good. I prefer for them to be constructive, but hey, this is the internet. All right, I will see you later. Peace.